It is the year 1066, a year of great upheaval in Western Europe. King Edward of Wessex, the latest in a line of rulers stretching back to Alfred the Great, has died without a direct heir. Several of England's most powerful neighbours stake their claims to the throne of the Anglo-Saxons. First and foremost Harold Godwinson, most powerful of the late king's vassals, and chosen by the Wittengamot who speak for the people of England. He is crowned king on the day of the 6th of January, while external forces look on in anger. King Harald Hardrada of Norway, veteran Varangian and famed adventurer, claims the throne as well. Lastly, the Duke of Normandy, William the Bastard, has supposedly been promised the throne by King Edward, and had received Godwinson's oath to support his ascension to kingship. He has not taken kindly to Godwinson's oath-breaking, though Harold insists he made it under duress, and thus it is invalid. By the end of October, Harold Hardrada and Harold Godwinson have both been slain in battle. William de Normandy is now, in name, King of England. However, many of the king's newfound subjects do not love him, and only time will tell whether William will come to terms with the Anglo-Saxons, or destroy them. A rider had come in the night, wearing a surcoat emblazoned with the sigil of my liege, Duke Morcar of York. My father had told me many years ago that messages that arrived past sunset contained the darkest words, and his wisdom came true to me as I read the scrawled letter. Just weeks ago, King Harold of Godwinson, chosen successor to Edward the Confessor, had been killed defending his throne, and his nephew Edgar passed over in favour of the king's killer, some bastard from France. Duke Morcar said that he would count on me in the days to come, as he knew my loyalty was absolute. I did not miss the meaning behind his words. He intended to resist the invader and throw him back into the sea, and he wanted me to follow him on that dangerous path. I dropped the message in the hearth, its corners peeling and blackening as the fire took it. I would not tie myself to an unwinnable cause and risk my lands and family. I would do what was best for me and mine. I am Osulf of Bamburgh, Count of Northumberland by the grace of God and the late King Edward. My father was Adolf of Bamburgh, a loyal Huscarl of King Edward, who supported his claim as King of the English against the Danes, and in thanks for my father's service I was granted the castle and surrounding lands of Northumberland after he was slain in a riot. I have yet to have a son, but as my dear half-brother Haldan is the heir to the family lands, if I was to lose my life to war or some passing sickness, at least that damn-fooled Morcar would not simply seize them. Still, a lord must have a son, and Haldan came to me in my solar to pester me about our marriages again, or rather the fact we were both still unwed. I informed him I had already sent out proposals for us both to wed some noble brides, and would be hearing back soon. He seemed disappointed that he would have no say over who he married, but if he had his way, he would marry the last petty wench he messed at the bottomless tankard. No. As nobles, we must make arrangements that benefit the family line, and as such, I must choose pragmatism over emotion. The first response came back. The daughter of the late King Harold, Githa, was nearing adulthood, and her guardian, Count Waltheoth of Northampton, believed that a betrothal to me was the best match she could get, with her father slain and her inheritance stolen. I took no offence. She was still a princess by birth, and a respectable bride for any man. I knew that I was risking the new king's displeasure by marrying the daughter of his predecessor, especially one he had slain in battle. A king's displeasure is a dangerous thing to risk, and so I dispatched a messenger to London to smooth over any insult my actions may have caused. It went better than I could have ever imagined. The rider returned with a message from the king himself. It was written in French, a sign of just how foreign this new king was, but my messenger gave me an idea of the general meaning, and it was positive. No offence had been taken, and King William would even assent to Haldan marrying his daughter. The smile had barely left my face when another messenger, my kinsman Seward, brought me the news I'd been dreading. My foolish liege, Duke Morcar, had refused a royal command, and had taken up arms against the king. The king I had just promised eternal friendship to, and had just arranged a royal marriage with, and I was duty-bound to assist my direct liege. I think I might have scared off the serving girl with some of the things I said in that moment. Nevertheless, I ordered the minimum number of peasants to join with the duke's host, as per my obligations, but I also sent Seward to the capital to meet with the king and profess my loyalty. That I was duty-bound to aid Morcar, but prayed for his victory against the traitor. I kept the bulk of my levies at home to ward off any minor raiding party and waited for the storm to pass. My scouts reported that Morcar had been crushed in the county of Lancaster, his host routed, and I prayed in the chapel for the souls of those I had sent to their death. When those same scouts reported that the royal army, led by the king himself, was marching to Northumberland, I realised my error. William was a warrior king, he led from the front. He was not one to hide in his capital when his authority was threatened. Siward would meet only his wife and children in London, but the king was here. He thought I'd willingly join my liege in his foolish gambit. He thought me an oath-breaker. I thought of running, but even if I could escape, I would not disgrace myself by abandoning my lands. The king bore down on us and I prepared my men for a fight. My single column was vastly outnumbered and the peasants broke and ran, while I withdrew to the castle. Githa, the daughter of Godwinson, arrived to a castle under siege, somehow making safe passage through the enemy lines to enter the keep. Our marriage was a humble affair, as no real celebration could take place during the siege, but I promised my new wife that we would make up for it in droves once the war was over. If I kept my head, of course. I sent a rider to Morka, resigning from his council in disgust at his rule. I received a flurry of messages from the traitor, each more panicked and desperate than the last, and each one was cast into the fire, unanswered. Bamburgh was seized in May, but I was allowed safe passage by the king, who had received word from London of my loyalty and intentions. Apparently Siward had convinced Queen Matilda to inform her husband of the truth, and so I was treated leniently. A few weeks later, Githa informed me that she was with child, which was the best news I had heard in a long time. On the first day of the year 1070, the news came that Morka had laid down his sword, finally. In return for his life, the king had confiscated Westmoreland and the dukedom of Northumberland from the humble duke. And the same day a royal message arrived announcing that, in honour of my nobility and loyalty, I was elevated to the rank of duke. Halden, Siward and the other members of my court congratulated me on my appointment, and my new vassal, Bishop Aethelwine of Durham, was quick to swear his loyalty to me. But beneath my smiles and my mirth, I could not help but think of how I had achieved this advancement. Yes, Morka had been a traitor to the crown, but he had relied on my loyalty. Perhaps he would not have acted so foolishly if he had known I would not rally to his cause. I shook the thoughts away. Morka was lucky to keep his head, and had been an awful liege. King William was honourable and generous, and now I served him directly. In July, Githa presented me with my first daughter, wanting to name her Maud. I told her that was a terrible name, and instead had her christened Gunhilda. Hereward Wake, returned from the dungeons of the king through my use of gold, approached me requesting to be my marshal. He had fought valiantly, and displayed a tactical acumen that would have served him well, if he had not been so quickly captured. I dispatched Siward across the Scottish border to meet with my cousin, Adolf, Earl of Teviotdale. Familial ties across kingdoms helped keep the peace, and I'm sure the king approved. It was not long until a letter from Siward arrived, bearing the familial seal. Adolf gave his compliments for my rise, but also gave a hint that all was not well among the Scottish lords. Rebellion was not unimaginable, and the chaos of such times might spill over the border. I took some time away from Bamburgh to visit a monastery at Cluny at the invitation of the monks there. Naturally, I brought along some of the brothers from Lindisfarne, whose numbers had swelled since the dark times of the Viking raids, and the two groups of monks conversed happily in Latin while I studied the fascinating architecture. When I returned home, Siward met me at the shore, informing me with a smile upon his face that he was now the father of a beautiful daughter, who he had named Githa in honour of my wife. Apparently, she had been much taken with the child, but later confided with me that she thought the girl too scrawny to hold her name. In February 1073, after many years of waiting, Halden was finally to be wed, to the daughter of a king no less. Cecilia de Normandy was a beauty to behold, although she clearly found our ways to be brutish. Nevertheless, she did her duty as a good wife, and was with child within the year. Halden was overjoyed, and we drank ale late into the night, me giving him sage advice on becoming a father, him putting me in my place with a tale of my younger foolishness when I became too overbearing. By the end, neither of us could properly stand, the drink having stolen our senses. I woke the next day with a head heavier than a suit of plate, and Siward had to hold court while I spent the day with my head down the privy. Halden got it worse. While I was coughing up last night's drink, he was choking up his lungs. The Almighty had chosen, for reasons Bishop Aethelwine cannot explain to me, to strike him down with a terrible illness. He was dead within the week. As I stood next to his coffin, the bishop's words washed over me, and I gave my own private benediction to his soul. I turned to Cecilia, promising her any support she needed to support her and Halden's unborn child. She graciously thanked me, but her eyes never left the coffin as the pallbearers carried him into the familial crypt where our father rested. Within days of the birth of Wulfgifu, Halden's daughter, royal messengers arrived at Bamburgh Castle with a royal summons for Cecilia. With her so young and widowed so early, her father intended to marry her off to another suitor. Unable to refuse her father and her king, she accompanied the men, but she tearfully left Wulfgifu in my care, Clearly, she was worried that her new husband, whoever it would be, would not appreciate another man's child and was scared for her safety. I promised I would raise her as if she was my own daughter. In 1076, Gunhilda was of the age where she could be taught the skills she would need in life. I intended to handle that myself, showing her the ways of her father and her grandfather. But the king intervened. He politely suggested that Gunhilda be under the wardship of the Duke of Kent, one of the men he'd brought with him to England from Normandy. With the title of Duke still ill-fitting around my shoulders, it would have been ill-advisable to decline, and so Gunhilda boarded the ship for Kent, as her mother cried into my shoulder. The two could have not been more different. Githa was weeping, but Gunhilda was stoic and proud, or as stoic and proud as a 6-year-old can be. News came that the rebellion that Adolf had warned me about had finally erupted across the border. Unhappy with Duncan II's rule, a number of lords had risen to place another on the throne. Siward promised to stay with Adolf and report on occurrences, lest my lands be in danger. Githa gave me another daughter in 1078, and at her request we named her after her mother. While I love my daughters dearly, I cannot help but wish the next child from my wife will be a son, to continue the family name. I received a message from Adolf, carried by a rider that arrived as I began my supper. I knew, deep down, what it would say, even as I broke my cousin's seal. My father's words came back to me as I read the writing in the light of the setting sun. Siward, the man who had gained me my dukedom with his honeyed words, the man who, alongside Haldan, had followed me when I was at risk of dishonour and death, had fallen ill while following Adolf in his campaign. According to the words on the parchment, he had not suffered for long before the sickness finished its work, and Adolf had taken the liberty of burying him in Teviot Dale alongside his own close family. He begged forgiveness for this act, but with the war raging there was no way he could return the body safely. A decade ago, I was surrounded by cousins and brothers, beholden to a foolish liege, and limited in my influence. Now I am one of the king's most trusted and powerful vassals, the lord of extensive lands, and the father of 3 beautiful daughters. And yet I have no one I would truly call a friend left to me. Still, I am a lord of the realm, and I must put pragmatism over emotion. While my daughters live, my family survives, and I must forge them a worthy inheritance for when the Lord inevitably takes me from this world, as he is wont to do. The Bamber family will not pass from the chronicles without mention. I will not allow it. I will not allow history to forget what we have done.